Hi and welcome back to my channel. I'm Simon and today I am back with the penultimate of mine and the artist formerly known as my mother, Louise Savage of Louise Savage Muses, parallel reads of the Booker Prize shortlist. And in this video you're going to see us both as we read James. And for those of you who may have missed the previous ones, I'll link all four of them down below on mine and mum's channel. Sorry, the artist formerly known as my mother's channel. We basically catch up with you, not with each other, but with you at various points throughout the book, about 20 pages in, about halfway through and at the end, and you follow how similar or not our responses to the books have been. With James, I think it's going to be quite interesting because Mum has read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and I haven't. And I know lots of people said, oh Simon, you really should. And I respect that opinion and I thank you very much for it. I'm completely ignoring it though, because I do feel like if a book is up for a prize, it needs to be able to stand alone. I want to go into this with that in mind because I feel like even though I know Percival Everett has talked about this book talking or being a conversation or being in conversation with Huckleberry Finn, I just feel a bit like, you know, if it's that good, it won't matter that I haven't read it. It'll possibly, if anything, make me want to go and read it, I'm guessing. I don't know. Haven't read it yet. Haven't started. Anyway, gonna head to that shortly. And so we'll have a catch up with you when I'm about 20 pages in. But for now, I will hand over to, I was going to say the mothership, but as I need to say, the artist formerly known as my mother, for her first impressions. And then we'll see how similar or not we are as we go. I'll see you when I've got 20 pages in, but for now, here's Mum.
So I started reading Percival Everett's James this morning. I've been really looking forward to starting this. I've only read the first chapter, it's about 20 pages, and I'm already really enjoying it. I loved The Trees by Percival Everett, which was shortlisted for the Booker Prize a couple of years ago. I thought it was sensational and really good example of sort of dark comedy. And I approached this, I would be reading this book anyway, whether it was on the Booker Prize list or not, because I think I'm becoming a fan of Percival Everett. So it was definitely on my radar. I might have waited till it came out in paperback though. And also because it is a take on The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, which is a book that I absolutely loved reading aloud to some of my children when they were younger, and Tom Sawyer. And Twain's writing is so full of energy and life and humour, and also, you know, some sort of very stark social comment. And of course he was writing in the 1800s, I think around about 1880, something around there, I might be wrong. So his perspective would be very different on life for white and black people in Illinois, where the story begins, and along the Mississippi River. So I think it's fascinating from that point of view. And James is Jim in Huckleberry Finn. He's a key character. He and Huck go on the run together, and their stories are completely entwined. And what Everett is doing is giving voice to Jim in this novel. And as I say, I've just read the first chapter, and it's very faithful, I think, to the original story from what I remember. You know, what's happened so far echoes the events so far in the original story. And we've been introduced to Jim, he's narrating, and Huck and Tom Sawyer have attempted to play a trick on him, and he is pretending to be asleep, and it's kind of almost a reversal of what happens in the novel. So and it's cheeky and it's funny, but also it's hard-hitting because Jim is commenting on the boys' perspective, how they treat him like a toy. And I thought straight away, this is going to be a really good contemporary take on a very old story. And then we meet Jim's wife, or probably not wife actually, female companion and daughter, because Jim is enslaved, and so we get to meet them, and we also get to meet Jim's male friends around a campfire. And there's a fantastic comment about one of the slaves is called Doris, but he's a man, and Jim makes some wry comment about how, you know, the whites don't really care whether he's got a male or female name. So I really like the way that the rug is being pulled from maybe the original perspective on the story, and I think I'm going to really enjoy it. And Percival Everett has managed to capture the same sort of tone and sort of slightly wry, but clear sort of enjoyment of the children's behaviour as well, which is there in the original novel. So I think he's sort of almost echoing Twain's style. And I don't think, if you haven't read Huckleberry Finn, you haven't read Tom Sawyer, don't worry about it at all, because I think it's just a brilliant story, and he's telling it so well. I don't think it would make a difference in terms of your enjoyment or your engagement with the novel. I don't think you're going to miss anything. What it might do, though, is tempt you to read Twain. Anyway, there we go. I want to get back to it. Bye.
Morning, everyone. I am about 30 or so pages into James. I think I'm on about chapter 4 by Percival Everett. And so far, I was going to say I'm really enjoying it, but that seems a little bit odd to say considering some of the subject matter that's come up already. But the book opens, well, first of all, it opens with a map, which I always love. And I do feel like this book is meant to be like a sort of adventure in some ways. I think the story of Huckleberry Finn is, like I said, I haven't read it before. The map is actually also in here twice. I was a little bit thrown at first and a little bit worried because the book opens with honestly, I could have prepared this better, couldn't I? The notebook of Daniel Dakota Emmett, who I assume is going to be important in some way later on. And that I found so hard to read because of the font. I loved it once I got into it because it's basically written like poetry, and it's funny but also quite dark, and has sort of unsettling undertones, which I think is going to be the vibe of this whole book, because that's certainly what I found since we then get into James's narrative. When we first meet him, he's interacting with a young boy called Huck and a young boy called Tom, and obviously that's Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. I know enough about that. Well, I've heard of them before. I haven't read the books that they're in, but I have heard of them before. And I was thrown at first because I thought that James was going to be the same age as them, but clearly he's a bit older as we meet his wife a little later on. And basically Huck and Tom are playing a trick on him, and there's this kind of comic element at first, and then you think, hang on a minute, once I twigged that he was older, I was like, no, they're almost, I don't know, treating him like a pawn, or treating him like, not, almost like they're playing games and treating him a bit like a toy, which changes the mood quite quickly. Then as we follow James, we get to know more people around him, and there's this really quite haunting bit around language, and he's teaching some of the kids how to speak around their masters, and the fact that as slaves they're there to help, but they are not ever there to point out that their masters might be doing something wrong, and the way that that's looked at through language in certain situations that are given as examples is really brilliantly done. It also then looks at how through talking in certain ways they can have code, because there's an instant later where two men are talking and they don't want to say too much more in front of a white man who appears. But so you've got that, which is also multiple layer, because you've got the poignancy of like, do not ever dare tell your master they're wrong, but then also how they can talk in front of them but sort of behind their back at the same time. I think that's been done brilliantly. But also there's been a really haunting scene about well, I don't want to give too much away, but suffice to say it was very disturbing to read, and it's about someone that James and his friend knows. Oh, and also the other thing so far that I found, again, that sort of, how do I put it, is the way that there's two sides to the things that Percival Everett is writing and how he's writing about different characters. So, for example, we meet some of James's male friends who meet and talk around a fire, and one of them is called Doris. And Doris is, as James points out, a woman's name, but the masters don't care whether they've called a man a woman's name or not. And at first, it's quite comic that there's this man called Doris, and then when you hear that, you get the poignancy of that, and the fact that actually it shows that Doris means nothing to anyone. So I don't know where this book was going to go at all. I have literally no idea, because like I've said several times, I think already probably in this vlog, I haven't read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Is Tom Sawyer a separate book, or is that also the same book? Maybe I need to go and look that up, but I don't look up the plot because I do just want to carry on. And I will say, I don't feel like I'm missing anything having not read Huckleberry Finn. There are occasional nods, and there's been one just at the end of chapter 3 that was quite on the nose, which was like, there's something about that boy, Huck, there's something about you and that boy, and I'm like, okay, that's quite on the nose. But at the same time, I don't feel like, oh, I haven't read the book, so I don't know anything about it. I'm kind of like, oh, well, this is intriguing, and maybe at some point, if I enjoy this, I should read the book. Although I am a little bit, or maybe I'll talk about that later, about my ums and ahs about Huckleberry Finn. But yeah, that's how I'm feeling so far. I now just want to read a lot more of it, so that's what I'm going to do with this young gentleman. Oh, he's not impressed. I've disturbed him from his slumber.
So I am now about halfway through James, and I'm absolutely adoring this book, I can't lie. It's adventure, it's fun, but it's bleak as well. So Huck and Jim are on the run together for various reasons, which I'll leave for you to find out if you read it. And one of the things that I'm loving about it is their relationship. So both of them are, you know, you've got this young, poor, abused white child. I think he's about 13. And you've got Jim, who's a black slave. And yet they've formed this very protective relationship, each of them looking out for the other. And the sort of respect they have for each other, but also both of them are constantly on their guard and actually can't really trust anybody. And I'm finding that really moving and thought-provoking. And both of them are really ingenious and cunning, and you know, that whole sort of surviving on your wits and having to, you know, you've got yourself and nothing else to rely on in this world, the world that both of them are inhabiting. So I'm finding that really fascinating. And actually, I can't help keep thinking of Odysseus and his facility for lying to get himself out of situations, and his, you know, ability to build a raft. And yeah, there's something sort of slightly Odyssean about their plight and their response to their plight. I'm really enjoying the journey down the river. The river is very much a sort of character in this novel, as it is in Huckleberry Finn. And, you know, all life is on there. You've got steamships, you've got other people on rafts, you've got, you know, logging ships, you've got all sorts of you get a real sense of the bustle and the width and the power of the Mississippi River. And you can't, it's a constant throughout the story. So I'm really enjoying that. And sometimes it's a threat to them, and sometimes it's actually kind of a help, a source of safety and protection to the two of them as they travel. And I love the sort of cast of characters that they meet on the way as well. Again, they're very faithful to the novel, but they are fleshed out. And there are episodes that we sort of, you know, that we're getting in more depth in this version, and then other episodes that aren't highlighted in the same way. So I'm really enjoying looking at what he's kind of picking and choosing to focus on. And the other thing that I'm loving is the way that Jim is so well educated. He's self-educated, so he can read and he can write, kind of. And he's read Voltaire, and he's read various sort of philosophers. He knows about revolution. He knows about campaigns to end slavery, and he dreams about it. But he has to completely conceal all of that knowledge and his ability to read from everybody, including Huck. And one of the conceits of this novel that I really think is it's so typical of, I think, from my limited knowledge, limited experience of Percival Everett's sort of humour, is that Jim is educating the other black slaves, particularly the children, how to deal with the whites, and the idea being that white people are gullible, and that black people, he's teaching them to put on this patois. There are some real sort of gut punching moments where, for example, he uses the N-word, or at least Huck does, and Jim's response to that, which just took my breath away. I think Everett is unflinching in confronting the power of language. And in fact, there was a wonderful quote that I wrote down here with Jim's thinking, and he's saying to himself, after being cruel, the most notable white attribute was gullibility. And I just thought, wow, that you can absolutely see why that would be the black perspective. And actually, I think, in certain situations, in terms of sort of the treatment of the enslaved, it's definitely true. I think that's an indisputable kind of aphorism almost. So that's blowing me away. And the way that Jim can't even speak in the way that he thinks. So occasionally when he's sort of half asleep or whatever, and he'll say something and Huck's going, what'd you say there? Because Jim is speaking like a white. He's not putting on this kind of, this patois to so it's as if Jim and by definition then other enslaved black people are constantly performing. And I'd never really thought about that, performing, dumbing themselves down, creating a way of speaking that makes the white man feel superior and woman feel superior. So I think the novel is very, very powerful in that way. And the other thing that Everett's doing is he's showing, or certainly thus far, unless he's going to turn it on its head, but he seems to be demonstrating the absolute power of education. The idea that literature can fill you with ideas, and without those ideas, how do you know how to react to the situation you find yourself in? And Jim's relationship with books all the way through the novel I'm finding fascinating. So you can probably tell that...
Hey everyone, so I am just over halfway through James by Percival Everett now, and I'm still very much in this book. I'm trying to avoid saying enjoying it, even though at points I am really, really enjoying it, because it does read like, well, it is in many ways an adventure novel as we follow James and Huck on this adventure of escape down the Mississippi River, which, and I don't know why this is, I feel like from a very early age I've had images of the Mississippi River in my head with all the different, the boats with those spinny round things, and yeah, it seems like it's just been sort of there. So I'm really enjoying how much of that is part of the book and the place, even though there's some really awful things going on around. But as we've gone on with Huck and with James, it's been quite exciting, because there's been pirates, there's been ne'er-do-wellers, there's been a lot of stuff going on, but then also there is this very sort of, there's those dangers that feel slightly adventurous and could go either way, but then there's also a real sense of danger, because what if James gets found? He's seen to have run away. There's maybe perceptions of what he did, because for those of you who haven't read it yet, I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm really I'm gripped by it, and I really love the character that Percival Everett has created with James, and I'm really enjoying the relationship between this man and this boy, which is a very unconventional relationship in lots of ways, but particularly because of the time and because of race and all that was going on in America. And there are some really, well, there's one very difficult moment where Huck uses the N-word to describe James, and I won't say any more than that, but it's just very awkward and everything goes a bit out of kilter, and I thought that that's handled so brilliantly by Percival Everett, because it's done in a very it doesn't take a moralistic approach to it, if that makes sense, but at the same time is all the more poignant, and also looks at prejudice and minor and major acts of racism in a really deft way, is how I'd put it. But there are also some major horrible moments, and yeah, where we're at, we've found, well, James particularly has found himself in a really difficult situation, as I won't say any more because I don't want to spoil it, but I'm really, really, really enjoying this. And no, I don't like that term. I'm very much gripped by this book. I feel like I'm really with them on their journeys, even when they may get separated at different points, etc. I'm so invested. That's what I'm really invested in their stories and spending time with them and hoping the best for them. I have no idea what is to come, but I do just think, yeah, that it's a book that I want to head back to it when I put it down to go and have to do, I don't know, work. How does that always get in the way? I love my job, obviously, but when I have to go and do things like work or, I don't know, Hoover, I'm quite cross that I can't actually just sit and spend more time with James and Hook. So, yeah, I will report back once I get to the end. I have a feeling Mum will be absolutely smitten with this book. I think, like me, she'll be really invested, she'll be really hooked, and I will be very surprised if I'm wrong on this one. But yeah, we'll talk about this more when I next catch up with you, including, well, maybe do I talk about whether I think it could win or not, and why I have slight reservations about that, even though I am so into it. I don't know, maybe not, maybe I'll save that for anyway. Over to Louise. I was going to say in the field. I don't know where she'll be. She might be in a library, who knows. I will find out as I edit this.
So I finished reading James last night, and what a gut punch. I thought this was a brilliant novel. I really, really enjoyed it. It was eagerly anticipated by me. And, you know, sometimes you really look forward to something and it disappoints, but I didn't feel this did. I just loved the take on Jim from Huckleberry Finn, but I also loved the way that it's an unflinching look at what slavery truly means. And in particular, it's an unflinching perspective on the white treatment of slaves. And I don't understand how anyone could read this and ever think that there was ever any grounds for not being completely apologetic about slavery and about racism, because by association, I suppose, what Percival Everett is doing is exposing the total unacceptability of racism. And it's so clever because it's witty and it's adventurous and it's cheeky, but the depth of love and some of the relationships in this novel are really important and under very adverse circumstances, but also the sense of loss. You know, the without sort of any spoilers, there are multiple occasions where Jim loses people or James loses people on his journey, and every single time his response to it demonstrates that he understands completely the value of humanity and of human suffering. And I thought that was very poignant. The other thing that I thought was so masterful about this, and it's quite a hard thing to explain, is the way that Percival Everett looks at the different shades of colour that we present as human beings. There's quite a lot in here about people passing as black, but also passing as white. And the characters that exemplify that and the way that's drawn into the narrative makes you realise just how arbitrary those decisions are to put someone in a particular box or to pigeonhole on the basis of their skin colour. Because actually, you know, where do you draw the line? You know, how dark do you have to be? How white or pale do you have to be to be considered one or the other? And of course, none of us knows, especially in this world, you know, the modern world, what our genetics might hold if they're revealed. So, yeah, I thought this was really clever. And I thought, you know, that as the narrative progresses, from what I can remember, it seems to deviate more from the original Huckleberry Finn narrative in terms of events and also in terms of resolution. So I thought that was really interesting too. So an awful lot to commend about this book. It's I felt a very quick read. And again, you know, it's another novel. I think that's been something that I've really noticed about a lot of the books on this shortlist, is that they are really profound and thoughtful and beautifully written. And I love the play with language in this novel as well. You know, the idea that that Jim is concealing his intelligence through the way that he speaks, and he's doing that as a mask for white people, because white people in his mind are gullible. And, you know, and it would appear so at this point in time, in this place. I think it's hard to dispute. So I just loved the way that the language was presented, and you know, that's not an easy thing to write at all. So I think all of these novels sort of wear their intelligence and their ability to provoke thought very lightly, and are seamless. I mean, the continuity and the flow of this novel and the pace of it, I thought were absolutely perfectly pitched. So I can totally see why it's on this list. I totally enjoyed reading it. In terms of what Simon's going to think of this, I think he's going to really enjoy it. I think the only thing that might get in the way of that a little bit is I think he'll be worrying that he hasn't read Huckleberry Finn, and that might, he might feel he's missing out on something. He doesn't like to not be in the know. He doesn't like to to sort of not be at the party. So I worry that that might cloud his appreciation of this novel if he feels that he's missing something. He shouldn't do, because I don't think that's the purpose of the novel. The purpose of the novel is not to simply reinterpret Huckleberry Finn at all. I think he's just using this amazing character to say something very important about our past and our present. So I really hope he does enjoy it. We'll have to see.
Everyone, so I have now finished James by Percival Everett. Sorry about the lighting. And the short version would just be that I thought that this was absolutely brilliant, and it is a book that I found haunting, heartwarming, heartbreaking, uncomfortable, occasionally very funny, a tale of adventure, a romp, but also really poignant and really, really deftly done. The second half of the book is more adventure and daring do, but also more of the horrors of what slaves endured. It also looks at the complexity of slaves who didn't enjoy being slaves but didn't necessarily want to be freed. There are a couple of characters that Percival Everett brings into the story where that's the case. I didn't quite know what to do with that because it seems so unimaginable. Anyway, it's also very much the second half is some reveals and some revenge is how I will put it. I don't feel like I missed anything from not having read Huckleberry Finn. Will I go and read them? Well, by that I mean, will I go and read Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer? I don't think I will, because, and this is going to sound really odd, the world that Percival Everett has created through James and this novel, I don't want spoiled by anything else. I won't pretend that this is a perfect novel. Sometimes I wanted more from some of the characters and to get to know their stories more. And I get that because it's an adventure and a bit of a romp, as well as being horrifying, as I've said, that there's a certain pace to that, which means sometimes you can't always, but I just would have, actually. And I would have liked the ending not to have felt quite so rushed. It suddenly becomes very fast and full on. It seemed a bit out of kilter with the rest of the book, because the rest of the book is like I said, it's an adventure and you're compelled and you're invested, but it's so deftly drawn, whereas the ending was just like, ooh, okay, wow. Yeah, I would have liked a little bit more character. I think actually, if anything, it's one of those books, I know I say this quite a lot, I would like this to be longer. I would have liked to have spent even more time. I didn't kind of want this book to end, which is a great sign. And in many ways, like I said, I think it is utterly brilliant, and it's just me being a greedy reader. I just would have liked, I think, maybe another 100 pages and maybe a bit more of some of the characters that we meet along the way. There was some foreshadowing that I mentioned when I first started talking about this book that did come to the fore. I don't feel quite that got fully rounded off, but I did love the way this book looked at language. I loved the way that this book looked at how awful, powerfully stupid, that's the term I want to use, how powerfully stupid white people were, and the way it looks at, or sort of the way this book is very much about writing your own narrative, telling your own story. And this book, by it being a kind of, I guess, a rewriting of a previous story, gives voice to James that I get the feeling maybe wasn't there, and at the same time really brilliantly looks at James finding his voice through the power of language, but also it gives voice to many who in history have been left voiceless and have not had the ability to share their stories, whatever they may be. And like I said, there is a spectrum of them through the people that James and Hook meet. There's a lot going on in here, yet so deftly and with such a brilliant slight touch of hand, if that's the right term, in the way that Percival Everett writes. I like the trees. I like this a lot more, and I definitely want to read more of what he has written. So there we are. I will have no idea what Mum has thought about this book. Well, I think she'll have thought it was pretty incredible, but I don't know yet because I haven't edited the video. I'm literally about to do that now, and then it'll be live whenever it's live. Sorry it was a tiny bit late, sorry there was a bit of a delay, but do remember, booktube's like not my job, and my job and life, well, sometimes my job has to come first, as I mentioned before, rude, but also life gets in the way and things get a bit bonkers. So yeah, sorry this is a little bit late, and also sorry that our final parallel read of Stoneyard Devotional by Charlotte Wood will also be a tad late. We will be, though, back with a ranking and shortlist ranking and predictions for who we think will win the Booker very soon, well, before the Booker is announced, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, do go and head to Mum's channel in the coming days when our parallel read of this will be there. And if you've missed the previous 4, I will have linked them in the comments down below. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. Would love to know your thoughts on James. Where should I head next with Percival Everett? Having read The Trees, I am very tempted by Erasure because I also really want to watch the film of that American fiction. But yeah, I'd love to know all of those thoughts in the comments down below. And I will see you in another video very, very soon. Bye!